I think the most important people that I want to hear this are the ones who are struggling with burnout. A good way to avoid burnout is to introduce sensory therapy into your daily routine. And by sensory therapy, I mean using things like your sound, your smell, your touch. Finding the right combination of smells helps me to be transported to a relaxed place, a vacation state of mind instead of the work state of mind momentarily.
Today on Strategy Shorts, I'm joined by award-winning marketer, poet, and author Tyler Wittkoffsky. I think I've pronounced your name correctly. Do correct me if I'm wrong. But Tyler, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and what you're doing on planet Earth at the moment?
Dan, you nailed it. It is Tyler Wittkoffsky. I am, like you said, I am a jack of all trades, master of none, but that's often better than a master of one. I am a blogger, a entrepreneur, a award-winning marketing communications professional, multi-genre author. I even do a little bit of podcasting on the side for my publishing company, and I'm just out here living my best life. My wife and I sold our house back in May of 2023, moved into an RV shortly after, and have been living full-time traveling across the United States since.
Yeah, I've been seeing this on your LinkedIn profile that you've launched this new initiative, Adventure with Coffee. Like you say, you're in an RV and you're touring around the country. So tell me about this new creative endeavor and why you decided to make that change, and what do you want to get out of the experience?
A lot of the change came from, just doing what was best for my mental health. I am a huge mental health advocate. I suffer from bipolar disorder, borderline personality disorder, PTSD, and anxiety. It's something that I've had to learn how to take care of myself. And part of taking care of myself was realizing that what I loved to do was traveling. And part of traveling, we spent a lot of money on hotels and Airbnbs and things like that. So we decided to invest in an RV. And I was like, you know what? I really want to move into the RV full time and just travel the United States. And I sat there and I thought on it for a couple months, and then finally came to my wife in January of 2023. And I said, hey, let's sell the house and move into the RV full time. And she was like, you're absolutely crazy. You're probably in a manic stage right now, and you're just thinking that everything's a good idea. And I'm like, no. I've been thinking about this for months. And so over the next week, I tried to talk to her about it and convince her. And she was like, you know what? Let's think on it for a month, and then we'll decide. And over that next month, I just kept telling her all my plans and all the things that we could do and showing her all these places that we could go. And I sold her on it. And we decided to sell our house, give up our corporate 9-to-5 lifestyle where we, lived in one spot for our entire lives and had an acre of land with fenced in backyard for our dogs, and gave it up to travel the United States. And I really wanted to do it because for me, traveling is such a peaceful thing, because you can wake up in a new place anytime you want, and you can change scenery, and change of scenery is often so good for somebody with mental health issues, being able to, take that next step to get yourself better. And I'm on a journey to become my best possible self. We lost my brother-in-law back in 2020 in a car accident. He was the same age I was whenever he passed away. And it was very hard for me because he lived his life to the fullest, and I was stuck living the corporate grind and, doing what I felt like I was supposed to do. And I needed a change. And this is kind of my way of honoring him and saying, hey man, like I'm doing what you would have been proud of, what you would have wanted. And, the great thing is now we've got his dog. So it's kind of like having him travel along with us.
That's awesome. That's really, really awesome. What a great way to celebrate his story and sort of bring it into your own legacy and into your own universe in a really powerful way. Now, one of the things we're going to be talking about in today's episode, it is mental health, and is how you can safeguard yourself as a creative professional, how you can leverage and make the most of the network and nurture the network that you have around you. But I'm sure before we get to that, because all of that's super duper important, but before we get there, I know that some people who are watching this episode particularly for us in the UK, right? You know, we live in a small country. The idea of living in an RV, there's not many places to go. Like you might be able to do it for a month or two, but you know, you're going to run out of room pretty quickly. Not to mention the kind of the economic challenges. So I know that some people who are going to be tuning in are going to be thinking, huh, sounds really cool, but like, how's the money side of it going to work? Like, how are you guys going to survive? Like, how are you going to keep putting food on the little micro RV table, so to speak?
Yeah, and that was something that we really had to figure out. My wife was working remotely at the time, and whenever we were going through that, I was looking for a job. So I decided, I was going to look for remote work. And for the first couple of months of this journey, we both worked remotely for a pretty much 9 to 5 job and took care of what we needed to. My wife does college admissions counseling for a college in Alabama, and I do marketing communications for a slew of clients, and we had to ensure that we were prepared. We have 5 sources of Wi-Fi. We have a Starlink. Each of our phones have a hotspot on them, and we have different service providers, and then we have a third phone service provider hotspot. And then plus campgrounds have Wi-Fi, so we're able to work remotely and still earn our living and make our money. And, of course, there are things that are actually a little bit cheaper about this lifestyle. We pay typically about $500 to $600 a month for our, living in a campground. So we're paying less than half of what we were paying for our mortgage in our house. So we're coming out cheaper that way. So we're actually saving money in the long run, which was one of the cool things that we really wanted to do because I had lost my job a couple of years ago prior to us making this decision. And it was a very hard thing on us. We wound up losing a lot of money and had to put money because we were also running a publishing company that we had to put money into. So it was also an economical decision for us to sell the house and move into the RV.
You know, I think there are going to be a lot of people right now who are sitting at their desks when they hear this and they're going to be thinking, right, the remote world has really changed a lot of things. And maybe it's time for me to pursue that Airbnb dream or to hit the road or work remotely for a month and just give it a try. And I would encourage anybody who's having that thought right now, you never know, give it a go. The economics could work here. And I just love what you guys are doing. It's a brave thing to do and it's a wonderful thing to do. As you said, you know, you're honoring your brother's story and you're also honoring your own mental health parameters, the things that you have to personally navigate and making sure that you're giving yourself that stimulation and freedom and that sense of joy and purpose by doing this. So I think it's so exciting. So I'm really, really pleased that you've taken that leap and wish you all the best. And obviously wish that you have very strong Wi-Fi wherever you go so you can keep in touch with all those wonderful clients. But we're not here today to talk about your travel plans and the RV, although it is great to be speaking to you from the RV, by the way. You know that we love to talk about practical things on this show. We love to give people tools and frameworks, things that they can try. But one of the things that we don't talk about that much is mental health. And one of the things that I think most people listening to will be familiar with is that working remotely, working from home, the kind of traditional structures and the rhythm that work can bring you, those things have changed for better or worse. For some people, definitely better. For some people, definitely worse. So it's great that we're going to focus on the subject of mental health for this episode. And I just wanted to give you an opportunity to perhaps frame like who are the people that you're hoping to speak to, the hearts you're hoping to touch by some of the things that we're going to be talking about.
I think the most important people that I want to hear this are the ones who are struggling with burnout. The one thing that I struggled with a lot in the beginning of my career was definitely burnout because I knew what it was like to be working my life away, trying to do what I thought the world expected of me and what I thought my family wanted me to do, and not doing what you want to do. And that's the message I want to get across to those people is that sometimes you've got to do what's best for you and not worry about what the world thinks is best because only you know yourself the most.
Yeah, I think that's so powerful and that's so important. So why don't you talk us through it? Because I know that you've got a few different it's not really a framework for this episode or an insight, so to speak, but it's more of a few areas to be mindful of, a few important essential elements that people who are perhaps engaged in a bit of a battle with burnout or their mental health need to consider. So why don't you talk us through some of your insights, which I know come from a very personal place for you. So take it away, and I'll jump in with any questions that crop up as we go.
I would say, starting in the beginning, a good way to avoid burnout is to introduce sensory therapy into your daily routine. And by sensory therapy, I mean using things like your sound, your smell, your touch, all of your senses to relax yourself and bring yourself back to a space, a grounded space. For me personally, I love using smells, whether it's essential oils diffuser or candles or wax warmers. I like finding smells that transport me to places that I love to be. One place, I'm from the beach, the coast of North Carolina, so I've always been at the beach my entire life for over 30, almost 30 years now. And what I've learned from that is that I love the mountains a lot more, and finding smells that transport me out of reality to the mountains. There's so many different forest and mountainy and mountain air smells out there. And finding the right combination of smells has helped me to, it grounds me. It helps me to be transported to a relaxed place, a vacation state of mind instead of the work state of mind momentarily. Also using things like touch and, being able to, stress balls are great. I used to carry a stress ball, or they've got fidget cubes that I bought for my wife. And, she just sits there and she plays with it all day. Whenever she gets anxious or, she starts to get a little aggravated, she'll grab her little toy and she'll play with it, flick the buttons and all that good stuff. And being able to find your outlet, even taste is a great outlet, being able to have a comfort food there with you, whether it's a snack or a brownie or something, some kind of comfort food that reminds you of a simpler time. I love having brownies because they remind me of my grandma's house. So if I'm having a bad day or I'm having a tough time focusing, I'll grab a brownie if we've got some, and it just reminds me of being there at her house. And I'm like, woosah, and I'm better now. And it doesn't always work like that though, and it doesn't always make you instantly better, but it is a tool that you can put in your tool belt to go forward and make those changes in your life. But as far as, and another thing is also, don't forget to take time for yourself. The biggest thing I see, and for me personally, was I was so busy, so wrapped up in getting these awards, these achievements, making the best money, putting in the overtime work to impress my bosses, that I was forgetting to do the things that I enjoyed, forgetting to do the things that I loved. And that really changed in 2019 whenever I started writing. So finding something that I enjoyed doing that helped me become at peace with myself, that's, whether it's writing poetry, writing books, journaling, singing music, playing an instrument. There's podcasting is a great outlet for people. I mean, I'm sure you can attest to that, Dan. There are plenty of things out there that people can do as a creative outlet, because creativity is such an important part of our lives. I don't think humans were just put here to work the 9 to 5 grind. We're here to do more than just that, to create art and to be these independent creatures, and being able to remember that and say, hey, here's who I am. I'm not just a cog in a big machine. I am the machine of my own life. And being able to remember that, move forward with that mindset, and ultimately, at the same time, you've got to take care of your family and your friends and the people, your support system, because those are the ones that are there for you at the end of the day, who, whenever you get off work after a stressful day, you come home to. Like for me personally, coming home to, quote unquote, coming home, because we work remotely, but coming home to my wife, it's just so much easier. I can get off, I can close the laptop at the end of the day, and I can say, hey, how was your day? And we can sit there and we can complain and rant for 30, 45 minutes about all the annoying things that happen to us during the day, or talk about all the good things that happen to us during the day. And just being able to make time for those people and not forgetting about them, not putting your career first. I did that. I put my career first and I nearly paid for it. I nearly lost everything whenever I lost my career. Luckily, my wife stood by my side and she has always been a supporter of me. And I've got to take care of her, just like we all have to take care of the people who have lifted us up. One saying that we have in all of my companies is the rising tide lifts all ships. And that's what I'm trying to do with my tide, is make sure that all the ships that are sitting on the same ocean as me are rising at the same level as me, if not faster. I'm cheering for everybody. And ultimately, what I had to do was stop being selfish. And um, I think that's a very crucial part of what we need to do as professionals, is take a step back and realize that there is more to life than just working. That we have to take care of ourselves and be happy, because work will replace you the next day if something happens to you, and it's a sad reality. Your family can't replace you.
We've got some really interesting things there, Tyler, to think about in terms of grounding yourself and connecting yourself and stepping away from the workspace. Loved what you were saying about sensory therapy, the use of smells, the use of taste and touch, like triggering emotional connections that can take you back, take you away from the desk, take you back into a different time of your life. You also mentioned the importance of taking time for yourself, and I guess putting some boundaries around your time so you're not always kind of defaulting back to the work state of mind, and also investing in your support system and making sure that whilst you're pursuing your professional exploits, you're not leaving the people behind that actually are the most essential people in your world, who are really championing you and looking after you. Now, one of the things I wanted just to quickly come back to, because you used the word selfish, and I'm sure that's not what you meant, but if people are listening to this and they are struggling with some mental health challenges, I don't want them to misconstrue what you're saying, and I don't want them to take that on board as a critique and a suggestion that they're being selfish. Could you just kind of tidy up what you meant by that? What's the thing you want us to take away when you use that kind of terminology?
What I meant by being selfish was that I was so worried about making myself better, or not better, but making myself look better in the eyes of civilization and eyes of society, instead of worrying about what was best for me. So it was being selfish instead of showing self love. And that was the biggest thing that I was doing, was I was more worried about what everybody else's perception of me was, and worried about pleasing them and showing them that I was worthy and I was valuable for them, that I forgot to show myself that I was valuable.
I think that's such a powerful distinction, because when you're focused on what other people think or what other people expect, you're sort of living in this projection of yourself all the time, rather than living in your embodied self. You're trying to meet expectations, and you're only burning fuel when you're trying to act like you think other people are expecting you to act. And so I think that distinction between selfish or self-centered versus self-love is really powerful and just really, really important for people to hear. Now, I had a couple of questions that I've jotted down. I'm interested in how can we as supporters, or people who perhaps have either recovered from mental health issues or perhaps haven't faced those kind of struggles themselves, how can we be better supporters of people who are in that situation, do you think?
I think definitely understanding that everybody handles things differently. And that's why I said earlier, just because I'm giving you a tool doesn't mean it's going to work for you. Some tools work better for certain projects than other tools do. So understanding that your solutions may not be their solution, but you can still offer that advice without being, oh, this is going to help you. I've made that mistake before in the past, where I've said, oh, you'll be fine because I was fine. And I had to realize, just because I was fine through that certain situation by doing X, Y, and Z doesn't mean X, Y, and Z are going to help this person. So giving them encouragement and saying, hey, why don't you try this if you haven't already? Or, hey, let me know what I can do for you. being there as a support system, because I think as people who have suffered through mental illness, we all understand what it's like to feel alone and to feel like, your mind is telling you you're alone despite the people you have around you. So, they say you've got to be louder than the voices in your head. So being able to speak up and say, I'm here for you, I'm proud of you, I see you, you're doing great. Just those positive affirmations are so important and so meaningful to somebody who has a mental illness.
So it's really about making the tools that have benefited you available and signposting those things without framing them as solutions, because just because it worked for you, it might not work for someone else. One other question I had is, these things, I guess, are an ongoing struggle, that you're never completely free of them, and you're aware that these things can return. It's more like an ocean. Sometimes the tide is in and you might need more support, and sometimes the tide is out and actually there's a bit more breathing space. But in those seasons when the tide was in for you, are there things that you wish people could have said or done and supported you with, that they just missed? Like, what's the stuff that you needed but didn't get that you want to make other people aware of?
Yeah, I would say people cry out for help in all kinds of different ways. So being conscious of that and saying, I've cried out for help in ways, especially through social media. And sometimes I feel like I'm screaming into the void. The louder you scream, the further down you go. And again, it goes back to something I mentioned earlier, just always making sure you're there for somebody, you're available. And that's not saying you have to be available 24/7, but because, we all have our own struggles and we can't be available 24/7. It's just not realistic. But being available when you're able and when you see them struggling. I see people struggling, and even if I'm struggling, I still try to reach out and just say, hey, I see you. I'm proud of you, of everything you're doing. I'm here if you need somebody to talk to. Sometimes a simple 2 or 3 sentences is all it takes to change somebody's attitude and change somebody's day.
You know what, Tyler, these are difficult subjects, and they're things that are highly emotive. I don't want this to be an interview where we just hit on a big subject and we sort of bounce off it and then nothing else happens. So we haven't prepared this, but I'm wondering if, having experienced a lot of these things yourself and having such an in-depth knowledge and personal experience with these mental health challenges and mental health subjects, would you be prepared to share some resources, some signposting links that we could include in the show notes for the episode, so that if people, when they're hearing this, feel like some of this is really resonating with me, but they're not sure what direction to take, I want to make sure that they've got some access to some stuff to get started, and so they can perhaps, if they're having a response, can take some kind of action as soon as the show finishes. So would you be okay to share some materials with me that we could include in the show notes?
Absolutely. I would love to do that. And I'll even include all of my social media accounts and such, so that people, if they're going through something that they've heard on this episode and they want to reach out to me personally, I'm there and available on all of my social media accounts. And I'm very responsive to messages, try to respond within 24 to 48 hours. I'm a digital nomad, so I'm connected to my phone and always checking for things like that, and being there, being a resource for people. But I've got a ton of other resources that have helped me out through my journey over the past 30 years. So I'd be glad to share those for anybody who needs them.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Tyler. I think it's great to make yourself available, but also those resources, I'm sure, will be helpful to a few people listening in. And luckily, you've got about 5,000 ways to get Wi-Fi on the road, so people should be able to reach you, which is great. Now, we love to finish the episodes with something really practical for people to take away and try. We've covered a lot of that ground already. And I personally loved what you were saying about sensory therapy, because I think that people who perhaps haven't tried those techniques or tried those things out yet, and probably might dismiss them, because sometimes it's like, oh, buy a candle. It feels almost too easy. But I would encourage, sensory therapy is great and it can be transformative for your mood. So if that's the kind of thing that you've been putting off doing, or perhaps thinking like, that's not really going to work, I would encourage anybody in that boat today to buy a candle. Like, let's give it a go. Let's try something a little bit different. But as I said, we love to finish with something practical. So where would you suggest that people start if people are thinking about what they can do in response to this episode today? What would that be?
I think, like you're saying, go out there and try the sensory therapy. Go invest in an essential oil diffuser or a incense burner. Essential oils and incense are great tools for stress relievers, and they have all kinds of benefits. And you can look up the benefits online and see the research behind it that proves that these scents are good for anxiety. Lavender is one of my favorite scents. So if you're somebody who deals with a lot of anxiety at work, grab an essential oil diffuser, grab lavender essential oils, toss it in there, try it out. What's it gonna hurt? What is giving it a shot? If nothing else, at least it smells good, and you don't have to sit in a smelly office.
Tyler, it's been so great speaking to you. I'm so excited for the journey that you are currently on. And thank you for your vulnerability and sharing your story with us. And I'm sure it's going to connect with a lot of people. So thank you so much for making some time for Strategy Shorts. And let's speak again soon.
Yes, Dan, thank you. And thank you to everybody in the audience who's listening for hearing my story. And please, anybody who needs somebody, don't be afraid to reach out.